about, oh, by the way, Shuli, could you tell everybody where the book is at? I have the book in my hand.
Can I actually show them?
Yeah, of course. Because everybody getting a free week.
I'll be right back.
We're moving along. We're getting close. Don't buy it because everybody on here gets a free book, as a lot of you are thinking.
So I am honored to show you the books in person.
Oh, beautiful.
So there's 5 volumes. This is when Rav Avi was in Israel. We got, sorry?
It's blocked by the thing that says this meeting is being recorded.
Oh, you need to press OK, I think. You need to press something to not see it. Let me put myself in the spotlight, which I don't like to do.
Julie.
Yeah, hi, Stuart.
Yeah, tell the rabbi I'm here, okay? I told.
Yeah, he hears you. He knows, and he got your message that you were going to be late.
Yeah, you're excused. It was an excuse lateness.
So you see the books are here.
I'm here, okay. I'm here, okay.
Don't know.
Okay. Hi, Stuart. And what we're waiting for is the box. And once we have a box, they're going to come in a beautiful set like this. So it should be hopefully within 6 weeks. Hopefully even sooner.
By Rosh Hashanah, and it's my honor to give each of you a copy of this class, where I think I gain much more than I give, that's for sure. Has really inspired a lot of this writing. And this summer I'd been pushed
Okay. What's happening? Hello?
Rav Avi, I'm not hearing you. Are you?
Yeah, what's happening?
Oh, I think he's frozen. I think his internet is frozen.
And I have to.
Let me see.
All right.
Okay, Stuart, I'm going to mute you. Please stay muted. Thank you. Okay, looks like we lost the rabbi. So would everyone like to admire these again? I think his internet went out. Let's see.
Right, so commentary on that. My internet?
Yeah, now we see you, so I think you're okay. Can you move closer to the router?
I'll go into the other room.
Okay.
I'm going to the router.
The truth is, you actually might not even be on the Wi-Fi. Maybe I can walk you through that.
Did you ever get a call back from Lauren?
Yes, but I didn't call her back.
Okay, is this better?
Yeah.
Okay, good. So let me get down to it. What I wanted to discuss today, in the time that we have, is to talk about happiness. And we're talking about happiness because in this week's Parsha, the word simcha, v'samachta, is found. So let me show you where it's found. It's not often found in the Torah, but here it is found. So if we'll take a look at chapter 16, if we look at chapter 16, and we'll take a look at it from in Deuteronomy, Julie, chapter 16, sentence 13. Let's take a look at that. Here's what the text says. I'll read aloud. It says, Chag HaSukkot taseh lecha shivat yamim. It's an interesting background. You shall observe the holiday of Sukkot for 7 days. Be'aspecha migarnacha u'mi'ikvecha. When you will gather from your threshing floor and from your wine vat. Actually, what in doing this 5 volumes, it's actually a thematic commentary on the Bible. It was not so simple because even our class has so focused on narrative, and the Torah is made up of many different teachings. And there are 5 times in the Torah when the holidays are mentioned, and it's a different flow. And what we're told here is that we're to observe Sukkot. And interestingly, Sukkot, which we most often identify as an historical festival in which we're commemorating when we dwelt in the Sukkot, in the booths, as we traveled through the desert. Originally, it was not an historical festival, it was an agricultural festival. And it's during Sukkot, Israel was an agricultural society, when there was the ingathering. That's why it's actually referred to as Chag HaAsif, the holiday of ingathering, of bringing in the harvest. There were several harvests, but that was a very, very important harvest. And that's what the text says. Be'aspecha, from the word asaf, when you gather, migarnacha, migarnacha, when you are gathering, goren is your threshing place, umikvecha, and that's mikvecha, yekev is wine. Then it says, this is what we're interested in now, v'samachta b'chagecha, and you shall be happy. You shall, some translated, rejoice. But v'samachta, simcha. Simcha means happiness, a joyousness, b'chagecha. And then it delineates who should be happy. Ata, uvincha, you and your sons, uvitecha, and your daughters. Thank God, daughters also count, of course. Ve'avdecha, ve'amatecha, ve'halevi, and the Levites. And then suddenly the hager and the convert, the hayatom and the orphan, the ha'almanah and the widow, asher b'sharechata. An interesting framework. The framework here is, and this is important methodologically when one studies Torah, when one looks at a concept, you want to understand in what neighborhood, that's a good way I think of saying it, in what neighborhood does that concept live? I mean, it sounds like a little nuts. I mean, we're not talking about living in an apartment building or some home. But by neighborhood, I mean, I'm looking into the text and it talks about, it mentions the word v'samachta. What's its neighborhood? What is it surrounded by? Well, the mandate to be joyous is surrounded. It is, as they say in fancy scholarship, it's juxtaposed to the mandate to observe Sukkot as that festival of ingathering. And the neighborhood also is, there's a delineation of who should be happy. Who should be happy? You. And then it goes on to say your children. And then it's going to go on and it's going to say, and the convert. And it's going to say not only the convert, but the orphan and the almanah and the widow itself. So what I want to talk about is whether in Judaism, look, there can't be a mandate to be happy. Happiness is a feeling, it's an emotion. And as we've often discussed, there are many who claim, many rabbinic, really great rabbinic minds who say, you can't command the feeling. In fact, some say you can't even command belief in God. Belief is a feeling. You can command an action. You can't command a belief. But I'm wondering, does happiness have a place in Judaism? I was a big fan. I still am a big fan of Leonard Cohen. And I have a tape of a concert that he gave in Great Britain. And there were thousands upon thousands of people there. And he was like the Rebbe. He's up there with thousands of people, and whatever he says, every word counts. And I took down exactly his quote, which evoked a lot of laughter. Now, you know Leonard Cohen, he was a person who he tried different religions, although he was a very proud Jew. I think I've mentioned before that in his will, he asked that when he be buried, that there be very few people at the burial, and that he not be called Leonard at his burial, he be called by his Hebrew name, Reb Lazer HaKohen, which reminds me about our Reb Lazer, whom I miss so much, must be in touch with Lazer. Anyway, this is what Leonard Cohen said. In recent years, I'm reading now, I've studied deeply in the philosophy of the religions, but cheerfulness kept breaking through. I want to read that again. It's a great line. He said this off the cuff. In recent years, I've studied deeply in the philosophy of the religions, but cheerfulness kept breaking through. And as soon as he said that, of course, the audience began to laugh. But, when you think about it, what do you mean, but cheerfulness? I mean, is cheerfulness not a part of religion? If you're religious, do you have to be so serious that you can't laugh? Is Judaism supposed to be a religion that is weighty, that's sullen, that's burdensome? Or is the mission of Judaism, what is the mission? Maybe the mission is to bring happiness into our lives, the lives of the Jewish people, and not only of the Jewish people, to bring happiness into the entire world. It would be an interesting survey to go into the streets and stop people as they're walking by and ask them, are you happy? I wonder. I've not seen surveys on it. I know that they've been taken, but you wonder how many people would really say I'm happy from a scale of, we have our students, men and women, rabbis. When I see them out in the field, the first thing I ask them is from a 0 to 10. Tell me, how happy are you? How fulfilled are you? Now, fulfillment is not necessarily happiness, but happiness. So is that really part and parcel of a goal of Judaism, that people be happy? Now, it seems to be part of what we're about. After all, it said in the text that we just read, "V'samachta b'chagecha," and you shall be happy on your holidays. And here, what I'd like to suggest is that Judaism parts company from what I see as a pervasive culture in America. That is to say that the Jewish approach to realizing happiness is very different than the American psyche vis-a-vis happiness. Now, I don't mean this in a negative way. America, of course, is a special country. But for most Americans, I think the goal in life is taking as much as one can for oneself. And the more one takes, the more one has, the more self-indulgent one is, the happier one is. What is happiness? Happiness means when I'm being served and when I'm at the top of the world. Judaism sees its mission differently. That would be an interesting question to go around and ask. What is the mission of Judaism? Now, And that's an interesting question. What would most people think is the mission in America? What is the goal of America? So what is the goal of Judaism? And I don't think that the goal of Judaism is happiness, as I've just described, in the self-indulgent way. Rather, in Judaism, happiness is interrelated to a commitment to perform good deeds. So let's take a look at what I think would be one of the sentences in the Torah where our mission as Jews is laid out. And this, Shuli, is in chapter 6, sentence 18 of Deuteronomy. And I want to point that out. If you have Bibles, you may want to take a look at it. It's a very key sentence, and this is what it says. Chapter 6, sentence 18. Here it is. Ve'asita hayasha ve'hatov be'inei Adonai. I love that. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 5 words. Ve'asita. Ve'asita. Chapter 6, sentence 18. Ve'asita. You see it there? And you shall do. Hayashar. That, yashar means that which is straight, that which is ethical, that which is moral, v'hatov, and that which is good in the eyes of the Lord. What is the mission of Judaism? To do that which is straight and good. You know where it's also found? It's found in one of the most beautiful sentences in all of Tanakh. And it actually is the Haftorah from my Bar Mitzvah portion from Balak. And we can find it, Julie, in the book of Micah, Micha. And Micha in chapter 6, sentence 8. As a matter of fact, this sentence is so important. I always wanted it to be on the doors of the sanctuary, and thank God Rav Stephen was able to do that. Chapter 6, sentence 18. Here's what it said. Higid lecha adam matov. Higid lecha adam matov. The prophet says to all of us, God has told you, the children of Adam, women and men, matov. God has told you what is good. Uma Adonai doresh mincha, and what God seeks of you, what God wants of you. What is it? Here's the mission. Ki im asot mishpat, to live justly, ve'ahavat chesed, and love kindness. And I love the last words, vatzneya lechet im Elohecha, and walk humbly with the Lord. By the way, notice that in both sentences, the verb is ve'asita. It's the last word of the creation story. God, who created the world purposefully and complete, says to the human being, lasot. Now you do your share. That's the covenant. You do your share, and in partnership with me, uppercase, God says, let's make this world a better world. Whenever we see the word asa, it's a covenantal word. And so we read the text in Deuteronomy, ve'asita hayashav v'tov b'nei Hashem. Do what is righteous and good in the eyes of the Lord. And Micha says, what does God want of us? Ki masot mishpat v'yavat chesed. Do good, act kindly. So what is the mission in Judaism? The mission in Judaism is a commitment to the performance of good deeds. And there you have it. And here I'm reading from Torat Ahavah. The goal of Judaism. Now, let's, if I may ask that you consider listening very closely. The goal of Judaism is not to be happy, but to do that which is upright and good. But, and this is the key, from living a life of uprightness, from living a life of goodness and good deeds, from living a life not of serving myself, but of serving others, from living the life of reaching out rather than reaching in, happiness flows. Here's the key sentence. In Torah, happiness is not the goal to which we aspire in life, but the result of leading a good life. I want to say that again. Happiness is not the goal, but rather it's the result of leading a good life. And remember what we had said before, you can't command happiness, it's a feeling. But doing an action, doing good, that's an action. We can all be commanded to lift our hands, put our hands down, and if we have the capacity to do so, we can do so. So from the action comes the feeling. Judaism is very behavioral. That's why at Sinai, what did we say? Here's that word again, na'aseh. That's that word, lasot, vasita, asot, asot mishpat vavat chesed. The Jews say, na'aseh, we will do, we will act, v'nishma, and then it's going to come deeply into our hearts and into our souls. That's the Jewish approach. And what I'm arguing is, and without saying anything bad about America, although, just to share something very personal, I think it's so important to have hakarat hatov, recognition of good. America has been very good to the Jews. But I'm not so sure about the future of America for Jews. I'm not at all certain. I'm more and more convinced that the central place, certainly the central place where we carry out our collective mission is in Israel, but I worry about the Jewish future here in the United States. But in the United States, I think the goal for most is, my goal is to be happy. In Judaism, my goal is not to be happy. My goal is to do good. From the doing good, from that action, happiness comes. And my sense here is that we as Jews living in the United States, whether we've realized it or not, we have subconsciously adopted an American attitude. Whether we know it or not, we've adopted this American approach that says happiness is the goal. And I'll give you an example. On Rosh Hashanah, do you remember years back, everybody used to send Rosh Hashanah cards. Now people email to each other. And it says, L'Shana Tova. It says, Shana Tova, which, how is it translated? We're just a few weeks before Rosh Hashanah now, believe it or not. We translated, have a happy new year. We translate Shana Tova, have a happy new year. That's not what Shana Tova means. Shana Tova does not mean have a happy new year. In fact, not everything that is happy is good. Not everything that is happy is good. What does Shana Tova mean? Shana means year, Tova means good. We're wishing each other, have a good year. The goal is goodness, from which happiness flows, right? And I think that this emerges from the sentence that we started out with. Let's take a look at it again, and then we'll open it up for your comments. Chapter 16 in Deuteronomy, and is it 16? Yes, it's 16. Sentence 13. Again, those sentences. Observe the holiday of Sukkot. Now, sentence 14. V'samachta b'chagecha. V'samachta b'chagecha. Chapter 16, sentence 14. And you should be happy on your holiday. You, your children, and suddenly it says, and the convert, and the orphan, and the almanah. And I would argue that virtually every time in the Torah where happiness is mentioned, It's always in the neighborhood of saying, you and the stranger, the convert, and the orphan, and the widow, virtually every time. That's what the sentence reads in its entirety. The sentence, what we're suggesting, is underscoring the importance of bringing happiness to the stranger, orphan, and widow. In other words, happiness is attained by actively sharing the joy of the holiday with the most vulnerable. And how do we share with the most vulnerable? Unable to help themselves. We're helping them. And from our helping those who can't help themselves, it's from there that happiness flows. You know, I'm a student of, as best as I can, of logotherapy, of Viktor Frankl. And Viktor Frankl, of course, wrote, I think the title was Search for Meaning. And what he says is, look, there are different psychologists who have different thoughts on what defines, what animates the human being to do what we do. So Freud said everything we do has something to do with our sexual libidos, desires. Or Adler talks about everything that we do has something to do with the human quest for power. And Frankl, in one of the most best read books anywhere, it's a small little book, I encourage everybody to read it, he says, what really animates people is inwardly, people seek meaning. There's an inner call within us to seek meaning in life. And there is no greater meaning, I would add, than imitating God by doing, by giving, by serving. From there, meaning comes. From there, happiness comes. One final word. Look at the difference between the American culture, which is a wonderful culture in of itself, and the Jewish culture. You can hear my bias. In America, when you read the Constitution, you read the Bill of Rights. What is it about? It's about rights. Bill of Rights is about rights. And everybody is calling out, I want my rights. These are my rights. And when we feel that our rights are denied, we're screaming out, these are my rights. That's what that document is all about. Our document would be the mitzvot. And when one looks at the 613 commandments, I don't believe that there is even one of the 613 that talks about rights. I believe that each of the 613, which requires discussion on its own, does not talk about rights. It talks about responsibilities. It talks about obligations. What are my obligations? What are my obligations? Obligations to myself, to my family, to my people, to the world, to God. What are my obligations? Two different approaches. One is top heavy in rights. The other is obligations, which is more outwardly focused. As we said, happiness is not the goal. Happiness is the result of leading a good life. That's what L'Shana Tova means. Not a happy new year. As we said before, not everything that's happy is good. No. And frankly, not everything that's good is happy. It's doing the good, doing the best we can, from which there's a sense of wow. And I believe everyone has it within themselves. That's what leadership is all about. Leadership, we may look at people and think they don't yearn to do good, but right beneath the surface, there's a belief that everyone has this spark wanting to do good. It just needs someone to light the fire. It needs someone to wake people up. It needs
Rabbi,
it needs the Beverleys and the Teds to wake up the world, do good. And from that happiness
Rabbi,
will come. Yes,
Rabbi White. Okay.
Julie, it's
used
in
to
your
go to shul
hands.
every day. I can't go to shul. I go for Friday night. But the greatest thing is on the 10th. You know, that's great. I see all my friends, my people, and the 10th, and it was wonderful. I never want to have to go back to my house, but my toothpaste take me back to my house. But if there's but when I went to 10th, that's great happiness. I see all the people, the goodness, the greatness, the happiness. I see my friends. That's the only time I can see them. You go to shul. But that's my happiness. I never want to leave the tent, but I have to go home. That's the greatest gift. You see people at the tent. That's my happiness. Okay, I can't.
Zalman, I love that thought, and that's a different perspective. But I think that's a very interesting thought. I will say, just for your consideration, dear Zalman, that the tent is an ultimate expression of giving. I mean, it's Joe Gutman and Goldie and others. It's just it's out there, welcoming, and it's just the atmospheric. It's full of
everybody's and they're happy. They're good.
Right.
They like each other. That's what I like.
So what do others? What do
so
others think?
Tova's hand is up.
Tova, what do you think?
You'll need to unmute yourself, Tova, because I muted everyone. Sorry.
I think it's interesting that only the Sukkot we say B'samachta b'chagecha, because Sukkot is a time of happiness. It's a harvest. But it's not physically comfortable.
Yes.
And so we're saying the physical comfort is not what you emphasize at the time of harvest and well-being. And
yes.
what
Just for your consideration, Tova, a similar phrase, v'samachta, is found in the same chapter relative to Shavuot. It does say very similar sentence there. I'm just reading now. It says v'samachta when it discusses Shavuot. And maybe you can help me with this. When there is a discussion of Pesach, the word v'samachta doesn't appear. And you wonder why. But it's fascinating. Yeah, it's a very good point, Tova.
Well, I think
Tova, what do you think of the idea of our kind of constitution, our 613, is not a document of rights, but obligation? Does that resonate at all?
well, that's what it has to be.
Yeah.
Because, we're always ready to express what we're entitled to.
This may surprise you. I once heard the lawyer for Johnson and Johnson. He actually had a son who was very involved with Chovevei, and so he came to give a lecture. And it's very seldom that you remember what somebody says in a lecture. I've had people who've come back to the Bayit who've said, Rabavi, I was in the shul for 10 years. I don't remember much of what you said. The only thing I remember is the hug. So if a person remembers one thing, we're doing very good. But I still remember he said something that really struck. He said, now Johnson & Johnson, I think is a very wealthy enterprise, very wealthy company. He said that every company has a mission. And if the company at the top, its mission is to make profits, that's the company, he says, that won't succeed. But if the mission at the top is, yes, there will be revenue, but our goal in taking in revenue is to give it out, to share with those who have less. Those are the companies that will make it. I don't know how true that is for every company and how sincere Johnson and Johnson was in saying what they said, but I like that a lot. I like when a shul talks about its mission, that I think the test of a mission is what are our obligations to our community and beyond, from which again happiness flows. Vivian, what do you think? You've been dealing with these issues all your life, leading the Jewish community at the JCCs and counseling. Is there truth to that, Viv? I mean, I really do find that, you know, if, and I'm talking to myself, letting you listen, if there are moments of sadness, if we can push ourselves to do what is counterintuitive and to give out, it's not like a magic wand, but there's something to it. Anyone else? Susan?
All right. Oh, sorry.
Question which is slightly off, and that is all these commandments. It says, this is the Lord your God. It's not our God that he says. In every single commandment, it's always your God, not our God. And if this is supposed to be Moses talking, why isn't it our God?
That's a great question, Susan, but just a thought. Our God, were it to use that language, and it is our God, then individuals who are part of the larger peoplehood may say, well, my contribution is not that important. They don't need me. Once it's your God, it doesn't mean that it's not our God, but it makes it very personal. It talks about our personal love, hopefully for God, God for us individually. And it also talks about not to renounce, not to give up responsibility, but to recognize that even if it's the responsibility of the community, I can't pass it off. I have to do my share. Just a thought.
Thank you. Thank you.
Not at all, Susan. It's just a thought.
So I see Ellen and Arnie and Ted. So Ellen, Arnie, Ted.
When I was growing up, rights, as far as my parents were concerned, were almost collective rights. They were very into the unionized movement. And it was a collective. It's our right, you know, and we should strike for our rights. But rights have become now so individualistic that it's dividing a country and not uniting it.
Right.
You know, it's my right to carry a gun. And so if I can sell a gun, then it's my right to do that. So what if somebody buys a gun and shoots 26 kids in an elementary school? It's my right to have one. The word rights has somehow morphed in this country, I think.
I love what you said, Ellen. It's that's a great insight. What I'm hearing you say is that, you know, and it tells me I have to temper and not be so absolute. And when talking about rights, what you're saying is that years back, in talking about rights, we were talking about everyone's rights. And therefore, in a certain sense, it kind of takes in also obligations. If it's your rights as well,
Right.
my obligation to see to it that your rights, that your rights be honored. I mean, I think it is the case that most of the time when we talk about our rights, that we're talking about ourselves too. The ultimate giving is when I'm giving and I'm giving to the other, and it's not me I'm giving to, although in the end, even you see I'm going back and forth, but in the end, even based on what I've said, if from giving comes happiness, then there is a kind of ulterior motive in giving too, because it comes back to me as well. But I don't know, I'll give you a very extreme situation. I remember when I was being wheeled in most recently for very serious angioplasty. This goes back right before COVID. And I knew it was serious. And as it turns out, it was very serious. And he was just a phenomenal doctor who, with God's help, performed miracles. But as I was being wheeled in, I was thinking, what should I be worried about? What should I be praying for? And I remembered the text that says that in the moment of greatest need, think about others. And then the rabbinic teaching says that when you think about others, then you'll be blessed first. Now, I don't think that meant that it's a patent. A patent means it's like a yeshivish trick. I'll think of you, therefore I'm going to gain. I don't think it means that. I think it's advice that when you think about others, and if it's a pure thinking, it does something to you. It kind of lifts you, and it rebounds in such a way it benefits. It's very benefiting. But I hear that, Ellen, and I think something for all of us to think about. Rights, like just on a small case, somebody, you're in an apartment building and somebody's blasting music, and you try to say, I can't handle it. It's late at night. We have young children. It's my right. It's my right to blast the music. And I think that's something to think about. That, rights could become so selfish as not taking into account anyone other than oneself. I love what you said, Alan, as usual. So, just the whole idea of the arc of rights, that rights at one time was so much more community, collective, not so individualized. And now it's very inward, even at the expense of another. I guess I would say it this way, Ellen, that years back, the demanding of rights was with the others. And today it's almost at the expense of others. So it's my right.
Yeah.
Yep. Thank you.
Arnie's next.
I just want you to know that what we're talking about now is theology. It's a certain outlook on life, and the Torah has its theology. And of course, its beauty is that, two people can look at the same text and can extrapolate different ideas, different concepts. That's the power of Torah. Is Arnie up?
Yeah, I have a quick little thing to say, and I was wondering what you would think about it. So Sukkot is the festival of ingathering, and enlisting all the people who should be happy. The list forms a community, says both an interplay of individual happiness, but communal happiness. And communal happiness can buoy and reach into the difficult corners where there are people sitting who feel on the outside and are unable to join the happiness until they're grabbed by the hand and pulled into the center. So I was just wondering what you thought about this ingathering of holiday, ingathering all the people.
Beautiful.
And
I love it. I love it.
between individual and communal happiness.
I love it. I love that relationship, that the semantic relationship. And Sukkot is called Chag HaSukkot. Now Chag is holiday, but Chag is who? Chag is a circle. And you use that term. Who's in the circle? I always tell our students at Chovevei and Marat, there are two kinds of rabbis. There's first of all a rabbi who thinks like a square, and that's the rabbi with rough edges. And then there's a rabbi who thinks in circles. It's much softer. But secondly, even within a circle, there are two kinds of rabbis. There are rabbis who look to dance with the people in the circle. But I think the best rabbi is the one who looks who's not in the circle. Who's not in the circle, and how that has really been the MO. That has been the modus operandus of the Bayit. And this week, Rav Stephen is giving a very complicated talk on inclusivity, on how do we welcome those who are often pushed aside. And in every generation, there are new issues that are coming up, and it's an important talk that only a Rav Stephen can give with the eloquence that he has. But I love that symmetry. Thank you.
You.
I think we have time for one more comment, and then we'll. Anyone else, Julie? Ted, we can't leave unless I hear something. Ted, you're on mute. I'm sorry, Ted. You're still on mute.
Okay. Can I be heard now?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, I'll make 2 quick points and without much comment. My first point is that it's clear enough that Judaism is not a religion of just having fun, however it affects anybody else. And that owning a yacht is not the goal, but to economic justice for all is more so. And that Judaism is based on ethics, and you don't need to say or see any more than the 10 commandments or statements, or whatever else you want to call it. Living by the 10 commandments is not easy. It's quite a challenge, but that's what Judaism aims for. My second point is that the current situation, in my opinion, is not an issue of left and right confronting each other. I think it's an issue of ethics versus unethical dimensions. There are those who are fighting for democracy and whose leadership people of very ethical behavior. And on the other side, you have the unethical who are now running the government, who are basically basically authoritarian kleptocrats. So to say it's left versus right clouds the issue. It's democratic versus authoritarian kleptocrats. That's my point. Those are my points.
You always surprise me, Ted, because I mean, in general, I found your politics to be more to the right, and here you are who you are, talking about ethical responsibilities, and that's what makes you unique, Ted.
Well, let me just say that Jesse, we're in touch with Jesse a lot.
Yeah, Jesse can teach you a lot. He sounds like my
He's
children.
right there in the midst of it all. And he says that there are definitely other issues other than the Constitution that are at threat. And so I'm very optimistic. I think the Jews are smart enough to figure it out.
Yeah.
It's like a teenage country. They have a lot to feel out. And a lot of people are assuming and taking responsibility who should not be in the government. Right. But Netanyahu has no choice. So when all this is over and he is freed and not put in jail, he doesn't have that over his head, I think he'll be another person and we'll see other action. His family has brought so much to Israel, and he's not going to want to go down as having brought down democracy in Israel. So I think it'll all be rectified. We just have to live long enough and have patience enough, faith enough that it's going to happen, and it will happen.
No, thank you. And maybe another time we can maybe open up with a couple of words and then we can talk about this. These are really complex issues. So anyway, I want to bless everybody with happiness. A lot of happiness, a lot of joy. We needed, I love the Leonard Cohen. They have been dabbling in religions, but cheerfulness was always breaking through. Like, religion has nothing to do with cheerfulness. I have a good friend, Joseph Telushkin. He actually wrote a wonderful book on Jewish jokes. Jewish jokes. You got to know how to laugh. In fact, I've read pieces that talk about how you can tell a person by the way they tell jokes. And anyway, on that note, I just want to bless everybody with a great coming Shabbat, and it's so good to see everyone. And God willing, we'll see each other, God willing, next week. And thank you for coming on. Thank you so much, everybody. All my love.
Thank you.
Arnie.